All right. Good morning, Doug. We had Trump's big speech last night in front of Congress, and just like to get your thoughts, overall impressions. How did it go? And then we can kind of go through just some notes that I had on the event itself.
Yeah, for sure. I thought it went great. Uh, I'm mightily entertained by Trump, just like I was super entertained. And I don't know if we even talked about this with Zelensky's visit to the White House. Did we get into that the last time?
Actually, we haven't even talked about that. Yeah.
Isn't that like the news cycle is just driving on so quickly? But it was great from the opening thing where he shows up on the White House steps, wearing a nicely laundered pullover and a pair of jeans. And Trump says, "Well, I see you dressed up for the occasion," or something like that. It was wonderful. And then when he sits down, Trump, puts the little bedbug in his place. But this is like the 1-2 punch. It's just, well, plus what J.D. Vance said to those horrible Europeans in Munich. I mean, it's all just great entertainment. But then we got to get into the detail about the about the reality as opposed to the appearance. So I guess that's what we'll do here.
Yeah, I think he can be a stand-up comedian. His comedic timing is really good. I mean, he's very, very funny. Amazing.
It is, and he does it with, I'd say, a maximum of 500 word vocabulary.
Yeah,
And
I think you're right.
instead of describing something as uh, the way you might, you say, and this will be the biggest thing like you've never seen before. That's a recurring phrase. He has a number of things like that.
Or some people say, they say, yeah.
Right. So if Trump's speeches were to be analyzed, what is that method of analyzing writing as far as grade level is concerned?
Oh, the FK score.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. His FK score has got to be like third grade, I'd say.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to insult him because that's good.
Well,
Simple.
Hemingway's third grade.
Hemingway.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So nothing wrong with that. It's a question of style.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about some of the specifics. So the big thing he opened with, or in the early part, he's talking about how messed up the economy was. He says, that emphasized that he was inheriting an economic catastrophe, and that he had to tackle Biden's inflation nightmare, that he had to rescue the economy, and that he was going to unshackle the economy. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, well, you sent me a list of what was it, 26 points that he made.
Yeah, these
And
were half of the first 10, I think, were around this. Yeah.
yeah, and by happy coincidence, I still subscribe to uh, America's great fag hag rag, the WAPO. And notwithstanding the fact that Be Bezos has, you know, given, I think it's fair to call them cocksuckers because I think a lot of them are. Their marching orders. Uh, they they're still ultra left wing at the Post, and they went through like 25 or 30 points uh, and fact checked them, which of course is a term itself that when you fact check fact checkers, you got to, it's all debunked, it's all bullshit. So in every single instance, they said false, or maybe there's one instance where they said can't be proven or something like that. But I guess to answer the question, uh, Trump is always saying best economy ever. Well, they're right. That's just nonsense. It's not. It's not the best economy ever. And when he talks about Biden's inflation, he printed up more money first than Biden. So this is where Trump falls down, where he says things that are really just not true. I'm very sympathetic to Trump, but he says things that are just factually inaccurate, and it doesn't serve him well. Although, from a rhetorical point of view, for swaying the mob, maybe it does. I don't know. But
Hmm.
best economy ever? No, no, that's just That's just a
Yeah,
fabrication.
and I think the reality is the changes he's making, plus all of the bullshit numbers that, were being put out about economic activity and last year, before the jobs data, which was all then revised and changed. Like the economic reality under Biden was not what was printed. Was not true either. And so there is a reckoning coming. I mean, we're starting to see some of this information already. And I think he's just trying to make sure that it all gets blamed on Biden. So he's rhetorically positioning it all so that the difficulty that's ahead, he can absolve himself of responsibility for it.
Yeah, and I don't think the average American studies the government numbers and all this type of thing. They just look at a general impression, and it's rhetoric. It's how you spin it. So I guess it's okay what he's doing, although I think he doesn't need to say things that he could be called on later as basically
Right.
BS.
There was one detail I noticed when I was listening to it this morning, that he's changed because he's been fact checked on it so many times. He's always said that on the Panama Canal, which is a point we're going to get to later, he says that 38,000 Americans died, is what he's always said. And then he changed it now to 38,000 people died. And it was the first time I've ever heard him, back off. Yeah, so he's adjusted what he's saying now to reality, which it wasn't 38,000 Americans who died. There were 38,000 mostly imported labor that died.
Well, and the WAPO also took a look at that, and it said, as I recall, I stand to be fact checked on my recollection, that only 6,000 people died.
Oh,
So who knows what the facts are? I mean, if you throw these, it's like I understand that the Democrats have hired some guy to write an elegy for the Biden administration, showing how wise and good and loved and respected he was. And you know what? Somebody writes a book like that, and people quote it, and it becomes fact, even though it's all lies. So it's reality becomes what you said, not what really happened.
yeah. One thing he said, I don't know if this is true according to the Washington Post, but they add a new regulation. That means you must kill 10 old regulations, like that rule. And I know he had a rule like that in the first administration. It says that it's 1 for 10 now. Like what do you think of that policy?
Fantastic. Wonderful. I mean, that's great. I think the old policy was kill 2 for each new one, something on that
I
order.
think that's what.
Yeah, this is great. This is wonderful. So, and I forget what WAPO said about that. It found some smarmy way of saying false.
I'm sure. Yeah. He did imply that it was the way it was, that the 1 for 10 rule was the same as his last administration. Like, so you could tell he was exaggerating there. But what about this, like making English the official language? What do I not understand about that? I don't.
Okay, well, I don't like, and I think any libertarian, let me put it that way, doesn't like government making anything official or obligatory. The fact of the matter is that English is America's language, but you don't have to make a law about it. What they can do and should do is when the government prints stuff, it's in English. End of story. You don't have to make it a law or anything like that. I mean, what's the reason for having dozens and dozens of different languages? I mean, it's and translating them for people in official government. It's crazy.
Is that what we do? Is that what the government does now? Is it, if it has something, it publishes it? And okay.
Well, of course, you go to a lot of places in the U.S., everything's in Spanish and in English. I think this is entirely improper. It's not what the government has ever done in the past. You're in America, we speak English. It's not a law. But if you want to live here, you're just smart to learn to speak English. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would like it if Uruguay published their government documents in English. It'd be easier for me, but I don't expect it. So,
no, no, exactly. So the last thing we need is more laws, more must-dos, and more regulations. And saying English is the official language is a mistake. Instead, the government just does stuff in English, and that's the way it is. Of course, what's likely to happen in the decades to come is that as places like Southern California and New Mexico become totally Spanish-sized, they'll, for practical purposes, secede from the US. Uh, and making English the official language isn't going to do with anything one way or another. Anyway, he's going in the wrong direction. No, no more laws, including laws that we kind of like psychologically.
yeah. So in his unshackling the economy, he mentioned a couple of things that I noted in particular. One was that there were plans to reopen power plants. I know there's like I checked this. There's some nuclear facilities that had already scheduled before him to come back online, like the big one in Palisades in Michigan, for instance. But also since he was sworn in, there's a bunch of coal-fired plants that had planned to retire this year. Lots of electricity coming offline, and they're reversing it. They're extending those plant lives. So that's definitely true. So there's that thing. He talks about restarting the Alaska pipeline and then expand production of critical minerals, he says. What do you think of all those ideas? And is there something he's missing?
This is one of the things I really love about Trump. He wants to unshackle American industry so that all of these things can be mined or produced in the US. And the reason that they're not is because regulations really do make it impossible. And if they don't make it impossible, they make it really expensive and really slow. So the things he's doing along those lines, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the number one thing that he could do is make it so that we can use the assets we have. I mean, if you think about it like, if I have I've got a bunch of lumber or trees on my property, right? And I want to harvest them, but there's rules around that I can't. It's like my asset, but I can't use it. Like that's the way a lot of America is. We have all these things that we could use. I mean, these coal-fired plants that they're shutting down, right, for carbon reasons or whatever. It was just they have to waste these assets rather than produce cheaper electricity for people. So this stuff is
and you mentioned talking about these power plants, small modular reactors. I mean, this is the wave of the future for power. There should be thousands of those things in every local area. Just kind of basically set them and forget them for a decade, and it would be impossible with a bureaucratic society like the Democrats. But Trump is going to make it happen. This is great. I mean, this is why Trump could really work and revitalize America.
right. It's getting rid of the regulations and allowing people to do stuff is the key. And these SMRs are a big deal. I mentioned the Palisades facility the plant that they're restarting. They have plans to put 2 of these SMRs, side by side soon. I mean, they were expecting under the old plan, assuming like a Biden-like regime, to have them up by 2030. So these things are already in motion. If he makes the permitting not take 5 years, these things could be live in 2026. I mean, it does change the dynamics of everything if you have cheap, abundant energy everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason why we progressed in the 19th century was if you were an inventor and you wanted to do something, you just did it. You didn't have to fill in papers and consult with your lawyers and wait years for approval. So it's quite possible to go back to those days.
Yeah. So the other thing you talked about this gold card, basically the kind of a golden visa program for the U.S. And I remember when he first said this, I thought it was very interesting. So he talks about, there's apparently a waiting list of people who want to do it already of 250,000. And he's like, yeah, if we get we got 10 million people to do it. Am I doing my math right? 10 million people to do it, then that would be $50 trillion, right? And
With 5 million is the number that he's putting out for a gold card. 5 million.
5 million, yeah. But 5 million would generate 25 trillion, right?
Let's see, 5 million, 5 million a person times a million, that's 50 trillion. So the question is, are there a million people in the world? I think that my math is right.
I think you missed
This is like trying to calculate stuff in Zimbabwe.
it.
So yeah, 50 trillion. They could get a million people that want to become American, but it won't work unless if they're still living offshore, if they have to pay US taxes.
He said
Why
that
do
last
that?
night. He addressed it.
What did he say exactly? Do you recall?
He said that they wouldn't have to pay taxes in there where they came from. And he implied territorial taxation so that they wouldn't be taxed on worldwide income. I mean, he didn't say that exactly, but it was clearly implied. I mean, he added that to it. It's like when I saw this idea first, I sent it to you. I'm like, this is really interesting because this is part of the essence of the pitch that you've had, to reform these third world countries for a long time, is that they have, an asset in their citizenship. So citizenship by investment or whatever, by contribution to the government, essentially. And doing it is a compelling thing, but you brought up, well, if they have to pay, if all their wealth worldwide is taxed, no one would do it because right now it isn't. Why would they opt into that? And it seemed very clear to me that he was saying that that would not apply to them, that they would not be subject to worldwide taxation as part of this program, which then would make it very compelling for many, I think. And I think that, that this is the kind of thing, this is the kind of thing you could put in the sovereign wealth fund. I mean, this was your idea about your hobby for these third world countries, is that you basically put all the companies or the country's assets into a public vehicle and you make everyone in the country shareholders in it. I mean, it's genius to do it.
All the government's assets, because theoretically all the government's assets are owned by the people. There's stuff you can do, although his idea of a sovereign wealth fund per se is a bad idea, because right now the government is totally bankrupt. What are they going to borrow billions of dollars more to put in a wealth fund that, some government officials are going to figure out where they're going to invest that wealth fund? And this would turn into a cesspit of corruption.
Well, I no doubt about that. I mean, you give the money to the state and it's going to turn into corruption. I think there's no doubt, but I mean, it's
could he get 1 million people to pay $5 million to become US citizens? Yes, he could, I think, if they were not taxed on offshore income, if they lived. But then to make it fair, I mean, he'd have to say, okay, Americans that live offshore don't have to pay either, because we're the only country basically that has to do that.
Yeah.
So,
but I don't know if he has to, but I don't think they'd have to make it fair. I could see them just doing a special deal for these people.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, exactly. $50 trillion would pay off the national debt. That'd be great. So
yeah. So it's a very interesting idea. I love it. This is the first time I saw it. I thought of you immediately because this is your plan. It's actually part of it. All right. So then he says no tax on tips, overtime, or Social Security. Talked about that as one of his plans. I thought we were getting rid of income tax, though.
A lot of people have forgotten that Social Security has always been with after-tax money. But then when you got your Social Security, it was tax-free. And then I forget when this was it the 80s? They made it taxable. So Social Security is taxable now, but it didn't used to be. So it's you put after-tax money in, and then you pay taxes when you get out. Plus, you get a crappy investment deal. Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. It's a scam. So if you, on the way to abolishing it, yeah, this would be a good idea, at least getting rid of the taxes on it, but it's got much more serious problems than that. But yeah, this is nice. I mean, step in the right direction.
Yeah,
Although,
it looks
yeah,
1983 is when they changed this, apparently.
I thought I remembered that. Yeah, it was irrelevant to me at that point.
Yeah.
But
So in 1983, were you assuming that whatever they do with Social Security, it won't be available for me by the time I'm eligible for it? Did you have that view in 1983?
I think the chances of your taking a tourist jaunt to Mars are better than the chances of your collecting Social Security in anything vaguely resembling its present form.
Yeah, I think so too. I think my generation expects that, though. I think everyone I know kind of expects that it's not going to be around.
Yeah, except for the people that largely because of the huge amount of money, I mean, basically 15% off the top of everything they own uh, after after taxes. Well, it makes it pretty hard to build capital for a young person today because of Social Security. So yeah, they want it, but at the same time, they're not stupid and they know it can't exist. So this is a time bomb waiting to go off. Has
Yeah.
been for many years.
Well, I mean, I prefer him talking about eliminating the income tax altogether than talk about these little, these little bite-sized chunks. But I guess it's better than nothing.
Yeah, it's not quite rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, but it's like preparing to launch a lifeboat,
Yeah.
taking 50 or 60 people to safety. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, if you're one of the 50 or 60. Um, okay, so then he talks about the idea of making interest tax deductible on car loans so long as those cars are made in America.
Well, the bigger question is, can the car industry survive in America? And my answer to that question is no, I don't think so. With the Chinese turning out high quality uh, electric cars for what are they peddling those things for? 10 or
I mean,
$12,000?
you can get us a shockingly good car for 10 grand. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're manufactured by robots. They don't have to deal with, but you can't keep these union workers employed wherever they are because they're unnecessary and they're obstreperous and hard to deal with. I mean, it's like keeping buggy whip makers employed. So it's goofy. Uh, and plus, with the taxes and regulations and red tape, which he's not going to be able to get rid of all that. The automobile business in the US is basically a dead duck. I understand that Ford, incidentally, I heard this unverified, is going to stop making anything but trucks. Have you heard that? Forget
I
about
hadn't.
it's gone, apparently.
Huh. I hadn't heard that. I do know that the most, profitable segment for basically every auto manufacturer that targets the US market is these, really expensive full-size pickup trucks. So that's what they all want to make because that's the biggest margin. I don't know how they still sell these things for $80,000 or, you mentioned 60 when we were talking privately, but I think they're more often in the $80,000 range. It's absolutely.
Yeah, what is it? The kind of guy that wants a pickup truck is basically a working guy, carpenter, plumber, whatever, what have you. So how can he afford that much for the most cheaply made of all vehicles?
Well,
we're
some
not
of these
talking
pickups are
about,
really some of these pickups now are super luxury on the inside. You'd be shocked. I mean, they're nice. They're outrageously nice. But at the same time, I see people complaining because Toyota sells their expensive Tundra in the US, but then they make for the Japanese market a very utility only oriented pickup truck that they sell in for like $12,000 in Japan. And everybody's like, why can't we have that here? Why can't we have it here? And I think the truth is that the American consumer wants the big luxury, thing. They don't really want, a utility only truck.
Yeah, I guess the cure for that is oil prices go back up over $100 uh, a barrel again.
That would change it. Yeah. Uh, so, he was proudly boasting the 25% tariff on aluminum, copper, and steel. What do you think about that?
Does that make any sense at all? Because in order to build an aluminum mine, I don't know if we have any bauxite deposits that are worth anything in the US, probably do on BLM or Forest Service land. Uh, Copper, it takes a decade to put a, it's you've got to drill it out, then you got to get the permits, and then you got to raise $1 billion. I mean, mining is just a horrible business. So how is putting, how is making copper and aluminum and I guess steel more
Yeah.
expensive for Americans going to help anything? It's not going to increase local production anytime soon.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. It's like I can understand in the thinking maybe finished products, consumer products, put a tariff on those, try and encourage, but if you have the foundation of all manufacturing, if those pieces are tariffed, it's really hard to build competitive industries around them, or around the value added stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. This tariff thing is a morass. I mean, I understand what he's trying to do, but the only solution is to cut spending, not raise taxes anywhere, including tariffs. You can say, well, tariffs are the best kind of taxes. Well, I don't think so, but you got to cut spending. It's not more income from the people, it's less spending. That's the only solution.
And related to that is less regulation, right? Because those two things go together. Because regulations are costs. That essentially is a tax.
Yeah. And in addition to hurting Americans, it's going to hurt the people abroad that are producing these things, which reduces the world standard of living. I mean, why not just put 1,000% tariffs on everything? How about that?
Yeah. Why stop at 25% if they're
Yeah,
so?
these are arbitrary figures, right?
Yeah. We haven't talked about this next one at all, but it's a big deal. Is that he's declared these gangs, these drug cartels, terrorist organizations, and he says specifically that he's going to wage war on the cartels. What do you think about that?
I think it's ultra dangerous and really dumb. If you want to solve the drug problem, okay, the drug of the day. It used to be marijuana was the drug of the day. Now it's legal. Then it used to be cocaine. Then it was heroin. Okay, so now it's fentanyl. Okay, it's one drug after another. It's the bet noir. Solve this. This is actually, if you want to solve the drug problem, you can solve it the same way the United States solved the alcohol problem during Prohibition, which actually gave birth to the mafia and a giant crime wave and uh, huge amounts of violence. It's the same thing. You have to legalize drugs. You want drugs, you want to take drugs, it's your business, it's your body. Okay. That's the answer to the question. Not, my God, making these gangs terrorists. These people are going to go down black holes, Guantanamo. Well, can't use the black holes we used to have in Syria anymore. We'll find
That's
a
true.
But it's nuts. The only solution and the best solution is to legalize drugs. That's it. End of story.
Because it's a push-pull thing. It's not like those cartels are forcing the drugs in here. There's demand for it. And as long as the demand is there, like there will be someone to supply it. And I think that if it's not these guys, the named ones, there'll be different ones that pop up, to do it. So that
Yeah.
it's not a like whether or not drugs are a good problem. It's like how do you stop the problems that are associated with it, all the crime and violence and all that's associated with it. And you don't stop it by the worst thing is I think it could blow up in ways that I don't think the American people are ready for, where because you have these cartels have networks in every city in the country. And so if you start exacting violence on them as if, it's not like the Taliban, they're here. They're in the cities, and they will. The only thing they know is you return violence with violence, and I I don't
That's
know.
right. They're wealthy, so they can do things, and they're violent, and they'll keep doing it as long as it's profitable. And it'll be profitable as long as the drugs are illegal. So look, you got to ask yourself, why is fentanyl the drug of the day? And the reason is it's like an opioid where it makes you feel warm and hazy. It makes you feel good. How do I know that? Because after I've had operations, I had an operation in New Zealand and another operation for my knee in the US, and they load you up with opioids for the pain afterwards. Well, I never took any of them because I didn't have any pain, except I did take some. I said, okay, what's the thrill with taking, what was this opioid? It's a popular one that
Oxycontin.
Rush Limbaugh was on it. And so I took a couple of these pills, and it makes you feel warm and hazy, and like everything's cool. It's nice. But wait a minute, what you're doing is trying to escape from reality. Okay? So the problem is really a psychological and a spiritual problem. And yeah, it'd be nice if if US society wasn't such that it induced people to want to live in a dream world. But if they want to, if these things are legal and free and you want to do it and they be affordable at that point, all right, you want to recreate with that instead of alcohol. I don't care. I think it's stupid. But you can't play uh, godmother to 300 million citizens. So it's counterproductive.
It's
Anyway,
kind of, okay. What do you think? And he said he wanted a mandatory death penalty for cop killers.
cop killers. Well, I don't know. Are they a special protected class? I don't. Well, to start with, look, I'll tell you, I don't believe in the death penalty. Why? Because it's punishing. Okay, you want to punish somebody that does something wrong, and it creates an example. See what happens to a bad guy, we'll kill you. Okay, I understand that. But what these people are forgetting about is that the most important thing is to make the victim whole, not to punish the bad guys. First, make the victim whole, and then you do the other stuff. Okay, well, wait a minute. The cop's dead. You can't make him whole. Yeah, but he's got a family. He's got kids. He's got an estate. So damages should be assessed for his murder, if that's the case. And the person that did it has to pay it off. Can't escape in bankruptcy. Can't. So he's going to be an indentured servant, maybe locked up in a prison for the rest of his life, but being productive. And if he won't be productive, well, I guess you have to sell his body parts or something like that to pay the debt because of something that he's done. But just killing him, once again, it's a very suboptimal solution.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems in general. The philosophy of the criminal justice system does not look toward balancing the scales with the actual victim at all. It is just about the state, right? And that's why it's always the state versus. And it's like, wait, the state wasn't offended here. It was that guy. It was
Yeah,
his family that got offended. So it's that guy who should get some recompense.
exactly. And the person to give him recompense isn't the taxpayer; it's the asshole that did it to him. And if he's recalcitrant and won't work off his debt, well,
His
body
kidneys might be
parts
worth something. Yeah, it's a good point. His kidneys.
they have a high market value. So
Yeah,
better.
I like that. I hadn't thought about that. That's a good idea.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's not terribly aesthetic, but we have a problem. How are we going to solve this problem?
right.
And
And the guy can either work or he can lose a kidney.
yeah, or maybe two kidneys.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, okay. Then he, outlawing child transition surgery. I mean, and he's talking about children only. Obviously, if you're an adult, you wanted to engage in this, but he wants Congress to pass a bill that says if you're under 18, you can't have it done.
Uh, yeah, of course, I'm totally opposed to all this transgender nonsense. It's stupid and destructive and unnecessary. What do you think is the best solution to
Well, one thing he said he stopped doing is they stopped any taxpayer funding of institutions that did it. Which I thought that was good. Like we shouldn't be subsidizing it, or it's actually become this like profitable business within certain hospitals, that also receive money for all kinds of other things. So it cuts them off from that money, which I think that's already been done, allegedly through the executive order. We'll see what effect that really has if it really stops it. But so that's been done. I mean, I don't like laws, but the more laws, but if you're going to have a law to keeping people from doing evil things to children, I guess is where I'm willing to compromise, because I think it's just so bad. And sometimes this is child abuse. If the parents want to do it, that's child abuse as far as I'm concerned. If the physician wants to do it and gets paid a lot for doing it, that's child abuse. So I'm totally against it.
Yeah, I am too. It's medical malpractice and horrible. So I don't know. Well, it's a cultural problem. I mean, it's part of the woke meme having taken over society. It's never used to be. It's never even, it's on 50 years ago. If you mentioned this was happening, people say, are you nuts? That's impossible. Now it's everywhere. So it's a cultural thing. So you have to turn it.
Yeah. Okay. Last few items here are national security and I get related in some way. So we talked about implement the Golden Dome to protect the homeland. So it's like the Iron Dome, but ours is golden.
Yes. Well, okay, I understand. Potential problem, want to have a solution, except, you can't spend scores of billions of dollars on a solution to a tech problem that's already a couple generations old. If you want to attack the US with nuclear weapons, which is the problem, I guess, that's not how you do it. You can put nuclear bombs on commercial planes, of which there are many thousands that land internationally every day. So you don't need an advanced bomber. You just put it on an old 707 that's got freight, and you put it in there and it blows up whenever it hits or whatever. That's one way you can launch a nuclear attack against the US, or you can put it in freighter craft and send them off, or any kind of small boat.
Shipping containers.
Shipping containers. So how is an Iron Dome going to solve the real problem? In addition, it's not going to solve the problem with hypersonic missiles, which are the next thing. They can't shoot down hypersonic missiles for all kinds of reasons. It's not technically feasible. Well, maybe it'll be in another 50 years, but by then, the Iron Dome will just be junk, expensive junk, like all this military technology. So it's a nutty idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's also he floated the idea a couple of weeks ago, which I thought was great, like entering in discussions with China and Russia about reducing or eliminating nukes. It's the exact opposite of this approach, which is that no, we're going to have this so that we can use ours without us being destroyed.
Yeah, it's actually provocative, because they're going to think, wow, now they can attack us and we can't do anything about it. So it becomes a tit for tat thing. Now it's a very bad idea from every point of view.
So a couple other things. Invest in reshoring shipbuilding. Apparently, like the shipbuilding capacity of China today is, I don't know, is it 100 times the US? It's some massive number greater than what the US has in shipbuilding capacity. And so this is a huge weakness that the US has right now. What do you think of his idea of investing in reshoring that?
Well, once again, it's the government's making the unions as powerful. I'm not opposed to unions. People want to get together, join a union, that's fine, but that they shouldn't have the power to impose their will on anybody. That's one problem. And the government's in back of the unions being that powerful, number one, and that destroyed the shipping industry. Second thing was the Jones Act, where it's absolutely uneconomic. It's why we don't have a U.S. merchant marine anymore, because any shipment between two U.S. ports must use U.S. vessels, U.S. sailors, everything U.S. It's uneconomic. So that's why we don't have any of these things. So the government's at the root of all these problems. How's Trump going to make shipping great again? Well, tax incentives, tax credits. The answer is to deregulate in all ways, and it'll sort itself out if it's economic to build ships there at all.
Okay. And, this Panama Canal situation is interesting because, he made a big deal about because Chinese had a lease or owned the shipping yards apparently on either side of the Panama Canal. And so, made it sound like China was taking it over is the way he argued it. It's like, we didn't give the canal to China. So he made a big deal out of that. And then it turns out now BlackRock with a few others actually bought those now. So they're not China controlled anymore at all. But then a few days after that was announced, he had this speech and he says, well, we got to we're taking back the Panama Canal. So I don't know. What's that all about? What do you think of it?
Well, I had an article about this in internationalman.com 6 weeks ago or something like that. And most people don't realize that Panama, the whole country, used to be part of Colombia up until about 1903, at which point we went to a revolution and Panama split off. And then as part of the deal, we got the canal zone, and it was all purchased. I mean, it was all quite legal, except for fomenting a revolution to have the country of Panama be created and split off. But the land for the canal zone was bought in gold for a lot of money, and the U.S. paid for it to be built for a lot of money, and it was a good deal for everybody. Now, it should have been privatized, but so Carter sold it for $1, which is very stupid. It's an asset that belonged to the American people, had no right to sell it for $1. It had market value, and it wasn't $1.
But that was everybody says Carter though, but it was passed by Congress, right? It was a treaty. So it's like, and I'm not saying that makes it more good or better or worse, but everyone went along with it. It wasn't just him at the time.
This is why the Congress or the government shouldn't be involved in anything economic. Purpose of the government is to defend you from violence inside the country with police, outside the country with the army, if a foreign country attacks you with the military, and a court system to adjudicate disputes without, and there's better answers for all those in the government. But yeah, frankly, the U.S. bought it fair and square, built it fair and square. The U.S. should still own it. So yeah, sorry, Panama, but this was something that shouldn't have happened. And the fact the U.S. Congress did it, I mean, who are these people? These are people that are power hungry, stupid people that are good at getting the hoi polloi to vote for them so they can become wealthy. So forget about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the same thing, if you agree with that idea, though, you also have to agree with every other law that Congress has passed is done in the same vein and should be discredited in the same manner, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I appreciate a lot of the things that Trump is trying to do, but I'm afraid the deep state is going to fight him tooth and nail in all kinds of ways. I hope he can accomplish the thing. And then he's doing stupid things too. We've talked about some of those. So,
Well, and the last one on my list was he says we're no, no, we're going to get Greenland one way or the other. Like this is one of these examples. I think it's like, and maybe there's something I don't understand about it, like why it's so important to the U.S. to take more territory, but it seems kind of foolish.
now Alaska is vastly more valuable than Greenland from every possible point of view. And still today, there's only 500,000 people that live there. And the whole place is undeveloped, frankly. So being part of the US, I'm not sure it's really helped Alaska at all, frankly. And how's it going to help Greenland to be part of the US? Because right now, there's 50,000 Greenlanders, and it costs about $10,000 per Greenlander for the Danes, small country. I mean, this is big money. Let's see, once again, 50,000 times 10,000, 50 million, $5 billion a year. Am I missing a zero? Cost the Danish taxpayer $5 billion a year to own Greenland. And it basically produces nothing. There's no point in it. At this point, Greenland really ought to become an independent country. It can become a tiny large, tiny population, large. It could be like the Cayman Islands, same population base, just another island, a lot more land. It could become very, very prosperous.
What about? Do you think? I mean, isn't it? What do you think of this inclination in Trump though to just go take shit? I don't know. I mean, the canal. I mean, you could argue that the Congress shouldn't have done that. It was a terrible decision for them to give away the canal, but they did give it away by our laws. It's legal, so treaty, and so saying no, that doesn't matter now, and we're saying Greenland, yeah, I know that your Danes claim you, but nah. We'll let you vote on it. And if you vote right, then you can come over to us. And if you vote wrong, we'll take it another way.
Yeah, I can understand why the Canadians could actually feel threatened, because the US has invaded Canada and tried to conquer the place in the past. But I wouldn't want Canada to become part of the US, because the average Canadian is much, much more left-wing than the US. So if you did merge Canada to the US would become a socialist country like Canada. That would tip the balance decisively in the
Yeah,
wrong direction.
it'd have to be like a Puerto Rico-like relationship though, where they don't really get a seat in the House. They don't really get what are the restrictions on the voting, that they don't have the same sway as the rest of the people and somehow.
Yeah, and of course, Puerto Rico is another example. Why does the US still own Puerto Rico? It costs, I don't know how many billions of dollars per year it costs to keep Puerto Rico afloat. It ought to be cut loose. They can become independent. If they become another Cuba, who gives a damn? Well, in fact, what damage has Cuba done to ours? They've just done damage to themselves. And it's running counter to the trend of history to make a bigger country right now, because all the countries of the world are on the point of breaking up and becoming smaller, including Russia. I'll lay money that Russia breaks up into a half a dozen or a dozen smaller countries over the next couple of decades. And the same thing could happen to Spain and Italy and France and even England. Unbelievable as it sounds, this is actually a groundswell under the surface in all these countries. Forget it. Most of the countries in the world are just totally artificial constructs of making the US bigger, and in the wrong way, making enemy. People around the world, I don't think they love America anymore. It's not about California girls and driving down the street in your convertible '59 Cadillac anymore. I mean, it's a giant, heavily armed military machine with bad intentions at this point.
Yeah. At least the thing is, one thing that's, I think, positive about Trump is that he's showing the way the US has always probably really looked at the world. Now, if we want something, we're going to take it. But they're always more discreet about it. They wouldn't say it directly.
Yeah, there's an example from ancient history, and it was during the Peloponnesian War that which was Athens against Sparta, and Athens was bossing all the islands around, telling them, well, you're either for us or against us, quite literally. And there was this one small island called Milos that said, look, we don't want any part of this. We just want to be neutral. And Athens said, no, you have to be with us or against us. And they said, well, we're out of it. Forget about it. So Athens invaded it. They killed all the men, enslaved all the women and children, and populated Milos with its own citizens, basically stole the land that was left over. And Thucydides that wrote about this, he's the reason we know about this, his famous quote was, the powerful or the strong do what they want, and the weak or the poor endure what they must. And well, of course, that's realpolitik. That's the way it works. But just goes to show that, the sterling example of a city on the hill, a great democracy, the first democracy, Athens, and they did these criminal things just like the U.S. does. Life goes on.
Is that the island where they sent people there to go kill people, but then they tried to countermand the order, but it was too late? I know
what you're talking about. And did that happen?
And then they're like, oh, well.
I'd like to remember all these obscure little factets, but that was something that did happen. And was it also Milos? I can't remember. We can look it up.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I mean, overall, I think Trump's and the Trump speech was all very, very positive in general. I mean, very positive. And I think he's doing some radical stuff that has to be done. And he's doing some radical stuff that I don't understand what he's going for. But
like you pointed out the other day, it's that when you've got a real disaster on your hands, the adult thing to do is to do the best you can. You're going to make mistakes. He's making some mistakes. But the fact he's trying to do something with good intentions, making mistakes in some cases, got to do it. Unlike the Bidenistas and the Kamalites, where they would have just dug the hole so much deeper.
Yeah, they just looted and pillaged on the way out. I mean, it's like the abyss is there. The economic system is going to collapse in one form or another. That's the abyss. It can't be avoided. You can either try and do something about it, try and make sure there's something on the other side, or not. And I think that Trump is trying to do that. And so I keep my mind open about maybe there's something about Greenland I don't understand that somehow fits in this puzzle. Maybe there's something. The Panama Canal is much better operated today than it's ever been, from what I understand. Much more efficient, much more effective. But if there's some reason why we have to take it, I guess. I don't know. I'm just kind of assuming that it seems wrong to me, but I don't know. Maybe there's a plan. Maybe it's part of the puzzle.
It should be privatized, frankly. And that would guarantee it's run as profitably and efficiently as possible. The U.S. government doesn't need another asset. Should be spun off. Maybe spun off as a public company and all the shares dividended out to individual Americans in a special account.
That's the way it should be done. Yeah, the sovereign wealth fund should be a public entity, and then I think that everyone has shares in, just like your old plan. And we should put the golden visa people in there and let Americans benefit from it directly.
Yeah, Americans benefit directly, not the government benefit directly, because the government is different from Americans. In fact, it's a dangerous predator sitting on top of the U.S. So people conflate these two things. They confuse the government with the people. They're very different things.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a big problem. Well, good. Okay. I think, that's I don't know, any other last thoughts on the speech in general, or just the actions that just everything? Well, actually, let me ask you, I have to ask you about what you think is really going on with Zelensky and Europe and the negotiations with Russia. Like what's happened in the last week with this, even before Zelensky showed up and we had that. I mean, I remember watching it and I'm telling Jane, I'm like, this is incredible. I mean, I've never seen anything like this before, public facing. It just has never existed, um, so even before that, it was confusing to understand what was going on because they're really driving, Trump's people are intentionally driving a wedge between the US and Europe. They were intentionally doing that. They were intentionally, um, being peaceable with Russia, to bring them to the table to have a discussion. And, it looked like they were just going to, the US was just going to withdraw from it. But then all of a sudden this minerals deal pops up, and like the minerals is like a fantasy anyway, that there's anything economic there. And then that ends up being the big deal. They have Zelensky come to sign, and, we had the whole scene. But I don't know. What do you think is going on? Like, what's the plan?
Well, I really like the fact that Trump is treating these bureaucrats with the respect that they deserve, which is no respect whatsoever. I mean, they're all doctrinaire socialists and statists, horrible people, philosophically and personally. So I like the fact that he's treating them with contempt. But they're potentially dangerous because Ursula von der Leyen said the other day, I think, that she wants to see Europe spend, what was the number she came up with? $800 billion for defense. Defense against who? The Russians are absolutely not in a position to attack Europe. There's nothing to be gained from it. So they're going to spend $800 billion, the bureaucrats, on weapons? Against who? I mean, this is a question that they never ask. Militarize the country, the continent, so that they can fight each other again. I mean, it's absolutely insane. I mean, it's doesn't augur well for the future.
No, it doesn't. I think I remember a long time ago you describing European history as one giant bloodstain or something like that. They just fight. This is what these people do. So, I mean, we're lucky we're so far away. We should stay out of it.
Yeah. Anyway, the U.S. wants to get involved in, maybe not now so much under Trump, but has been getting very involved in Africa. And people don't monitor Africa very much, but there are wars all over Africa of all types. I mean, just lots of armed groups and, actual wars going on right now in Africa. And there are going to be revolutions. So maybe the U.S. wants to get involved in there after Trump is out of office in 4 years. And what I'm afraid of is that he may be out of office in 4 years. Why? Not because he's not doing really a lot of smart things, but because the stock market's so high, and as he undoes all of these distortions, the stock market would crash.
And the economy along with it, not just the markets.
Exactly, and bring the market down with it, the economy down with it, because everything is so over financialized in the U.S. You'll be blamed for it, and it'll be run on it, and then the Democrats. So this ain't over till it's over.
What do you make of the minerals deal in Ukraine, though? Why is that? I mean, do you think there are minerals there that are worth $500 billion?
Oh, I'm sure there are valuable minerals there, but the answer to the question is it's all bullshit, because Ukraine's been an independent country for 30 years, and basically nobody has been doing any mineral exploration there, because there's no real reason to. There's no indications that, you can go out and spend billions of dollars exploring for minerals. Yeah. And maybe you'll find some, but they're representing that they've got, what's the number they're throwing around now? 7 trillion. They make this,
Oh.
they create these numbers out of whole cloth, and people accept them. Rare earths is the big thing. Okay. Rare earths are not rare. They're just, this is all hype. This is all nonsense. It's all bullshit.
Hmm.
What about
So
rare
what's the reason for it then, do you think? Why do you think that they were making such a big deal about getting this deal signed?
I
Why
don't,
was
for the same reason that when the Afghan adventure was coming to an end, they were representing that there was $1 trillion worth of minerals in Afghanistan. And then no, there's 3 trillion. They came up with
right?
these numbers. There's never been any exploration at all. It just,
And they said we can't leave because otherwise the Chinese will come and take that $3 trillion of minerals. That's what they said.
yeah. And even if they exist, what's to say it's going to be in any way economic to get them out of the ground? I mean, they never think about these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't understand. I don't understand what's going on with that. Why he's making a lot of it.
I mean, my backyard maybe has $1 trillion worth of minerals in it. I mean, there's 92 naturally occurring elements. So if I mine my backyard to the depth of 100 feet, all those 92 naturally occurring elements there, some are very valuable, but you got to mine them. Who's the idiot that's going to say that my backyard's worth $1 trillion? Because it probably is when you count all the atoms and what they're worth.
Yeah.
These people they're so dishonest and actually stupid. I mean, they have high IQs, but they're actually stupid.
Okay. Well, I think we can leave it there for today, Doug. We're scheduled to be back on Friday, so I will have questions from members of the file for Friday. And I'm sure there'll be something exciting between now and then too that'll happen.
Something wonderful or something terrible is bound to happen in the next couple of days.
All right, great. Thanks very much, Doug. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.